Welcome to the I'm Book podcast. I'm April O'Leary, and this is the YouTube version of our podcast. To get the audio version, you can hop on over to Spotify or anywhere that you consume audio podcasts. We are going to jump into some really cool content, so stay tuned for our next guest. We look forward to connecting with you, and be sure to subscribe. And to start your author adventure, hop on over to o'learypublishing.com, where you can map out the entire process and see what writing a book would look like for you. Let's get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm April O'Leary, founder of O'Leary Publishing, and I'm super excited on this episode of I'm Booked to have the fabulous, multi-talented editor who I trust and adore with my heart, Heather Desrocher. She came to me as a gift from God through a mutual friend. She was editing books on the side for some of her friends and prospective authors. And I just scooped her up because I love her energy. I love her enthusiasm. She has the skills and the eye of a hawk. She finds everything. And you want her, someone like her in your corner if you're writing a book, because writing a book really is a team effort. It's not something that someone can hide themselves behind their computer and then come out the other side with a really sharp manuscript. And so today we're going to be talking about the 5 biggest mistakes that she sees in editorial and ways that she helps authors to really clean up their manuscripts. So Heather, welcome. So glad you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. This is wonderful.
Heather is amazing. So, you know, as Heather and I were talking about this episode and talking about the things that we often see as, you know, she and I are both writers ourselves, but that we see others who come to us with writing and with ideas, the things that we could help others figure out about their own writing, possibly before approaching us with a manuscript, or the things that they can expect once they bring a manuscript to see when Heather goes through it. So I want to start off by just clarifying the 3 different types of editing and what a manuscript goes through if you start from basically raw first draft to final printable manuscript.
Right.
What does that look like?
This is awesome. And most people don't realize how much actually goes into it. So there's really 3 stages that you're going to go through. And the first stage is that developmental stage. So you're looking at the ideas and how the ideas fit together and how they're organized. And hopefully at the end of that developmental stage, you have a really good table of contents with details that are really what it looks like. And then you can actually write the book. So it's actually almost before you write the book, you need to do this. If you've already written the book and it's not very good, we still need to do this. So it's a great thing, developmental. And then you start writing and you'll check in and we'll look at it and we'll be asking questions is really what this stage is. What do you mean by this? Why does the author care or the reader care about this? And so we're asking big questions for the writer to really pull together kind of all the ideas. And at the end of that developmental stage, you have a manuscript that's pretty good. And then you go to the line editing. So then the line editor, another editor, so that's the second editor, looks through each sentence, each word. Is it concise? Is it clear? Is this the best word that you can use? And really makes it look great. And then at the very end, the third stage is literally the proofreading stage where you're just looking for errors. You're just making sure that there aren't any errors. So that's the overall, and that can take months, that whole 3-step process, those 3 stages.
But the good news is for anyone who's written a manuscript already, or for someone who's tackling writing a manuscript, is that it's not a painful process. It's a
no, it really isn't. I hope I didn't make it sound too painful. It's actually really fun.
No.
I love it.
It's
I get
fun.
excited
But
about
you know,
it.
it's something I talked about on a previous episode. One of the first episodes, maybe episode 3 or 4, I don't know, in I'm Booked, was about the qualities of a successful writer. And one of those qualities was open-mindedness, because I find, and you found as well, that when someone brings a manuscript, typically, which is why we're doing this podcast today, when they bring it to us, they think, it's done, here you go.
Right.
And that is a hard pill to swallow, if you will, when you find out that you're just in draft 1,
yes,
but we're going to help you.
Yes.
So how do you work with authors in getting them from, I think I'm done with this, because we've had authors that come in that state of mind, to let's back up a little bit, and how are we going to make this even sharper and even better?
Really, it's just a matter of questions is what you do, is you really just have questions. You know, you can put it on the manuscript, you can have a conversation about it. And you're asking questions, if they haven't already thought about, like, who is the book for? Who is your audience? Because unless you know who your audience is, you can't have a very good book. Why does the reader care about this? You want people that want to read it. And what are you doing that's changing the reader's life? Because we read books, and mostly we're talking today about nonfiction. You read a book because you want to learn, you want to have tools, you want to have insights. So what are you offering them? You have to be giving them some tools, is what I like to call them. And so asking them all those questions, do they have that? And just those questions alone make most authors go back and go, okay, let me look at this again from that perspective. And they get excited because that's exciting for them to start to think about people reading their book.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. And it's funny because an interview I had a few episodes back with a New York Times bestselling author, Chris Brogan, one of the points he made was that in his mind, he's always running through table of contents. And he's always thinking about who's his prospective reader. And then he's talking about what do they need to know more of and what does he need to take out and say less of. And I think that's what you're talking about here is really, you know, if we're taking a topic that we know a lot about, we can't necessarily dump everything we know about it on the reader at that point in time.
Absolutely.
So what are the key points? Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we run into with authors. And last night I had a conversation with an author and I said, you are living and breathing all this stuff, but to your reader, it's mostly brand new. So that's where an editor comes in and helping them see the places where they need to explain more or explain less. And when you're living it, you can't see that. And that's how an editor comes in with fresh eyes and can help them do that.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because when you work with someone, an editor like Heather, for example, they will help you spot those blind spots or say those things that might be hard for you to catch, because if you're really into it and the things that maybe your industry or your specialty, your passion has certain vocabulary that's very common amongst the groups of people you surround yourself with. If you're writing a book that's for beginners, they might not know all of that yet. And so it's important to realize. It's funny, I was working with someone on some Facebook technology stuff around Facebook groups and book launches and whatever. And some of the things that I take for granted that I thought was just totally obvious, this person had no idea. And so I was literally getting down to like, where do you look to actually find the button to do the thing I'm asking you to do?
Yes, if you've never done it before, how would you know how to do it, right?
You wouldn't know. But then once you understand the process, and you know that when you work with an editor, you're all on the same team. You know, everybody really wants the most professional and best selling and best representative book that they can get. And so that to me is always something to keep in mind, that, you know, it's not the author's words and the editor trying to chop it up, and it's everybody trying to aim towards getting a book that's going right to the bullseye of that reader's heart. Yes,
absolutely. It's like, how can I help you as an author have the best possible book out there? And that's really our goal. And just like with our children, helping them be the best possible children, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's also exciting.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the mistakes that writers make. And mistakes being sometimes, as I said, blind mistakes. It's not that we set out to do these things, but the reason we want to speak with you about these is because these are some of the blind spots we can help you see as you are in the process of writing your manuscript. That might help you save time and potentially save money on your editorial process in getting your book done. So what's the first thing that you see that authors do that needs correction?
So the first thing is just not taking the time and thought to prepare. And answering those questions we talked about earlier. Who's the book for? You know, who's your reader? What's the tool that you're giving them? Why are you qualified? You need to look at all these things before you start writing and have answers to those and know those. And then you really need to have a detailed table of contents. The title chapters may change and they may even move around, but you need to start with, here's my format, here's what each of the chapters is doing. And when I do a detailed table of contents with an author, I'm saying, okay, what's the main point of your chapter? What is the problem that you're solving for your reader in this chapter? And what are the tools that you're giving them? And you put that all down and you look at how the chapters relate to one another. And when you really take the time to do that, then you can actually write really well. And sometimes I even had one author who wrote a whole book and then pulled out from that book. We weren't happy with the book. It just wasn't the right book. she pulled out, with my help, the main points and goals. We made a detailed table of contents, and she wrote a whole nother book that was phenomenal. And it was a wonderful process. So sometimes you do have to do that. But really, it's about preparing. You have to really prepare and think about it and be ready before you write. And if you are a person who just sits down and writes, go ahead, but then pull the stuff out and organize it before you actually write the book.
Absolutely.
Does that answer that? Does that clarify?
Yeah, that's perfect, because, you know, no one's going to build a house. No one's going to go to Home Depot and just start buying 2x4s and nailing them together and be like, I hope this turns into a house. Nobody would do that. But I think there's this misconception that writing is just inspiration that just comes from the heart, and we're just going to let the spirit lead, or we're going to just dump all the knowledge we have and put it out into word format. But if you don't really have the architect, which is your table of contents, and possibly your editor, helping you really see what goes where, then you end up with a totally messed up house.
Absolutely.
And you waste a lot of time and money. You know, so if you really want, if the end goal is a book, you know, there are some people that write and their end goal is just self-exploration for writing purposes or whatever. But if you really want to have a solid book, this is a project like building a house. There's
Absolutely.
a process. There's a process you're going to go through. And step one, as you're saying, Heather, is get your table of contents, which is like your building plan for the book.
And it's a detailed table of contents, so you have some information that goes into it. And then and the thing is, I do too, is I have that when I'm editing a book, I actually have that in front of me, so I can keep looking at, is the author doing what they said they wanted to do in this chapter? Is it achieving the goal? And as a writer, you should have it right up in front of you, so you keep coming back to that as a guide, really. And there may be some people in the world who are brilliant writers and can just write a book and they don't need an editor, but that's like maybe 1 in 10 million. So that's not you, it's not me. Like, that's not the normal person, you know, like maybe there's the brilliant, you know, Einsteins of writing books, but it's probably not anyone we know.
Probably not. And even some very famous authors say that the first draft is garbage, even experienced writers. So don't feel that if you don't hit the bullseye on your first draft that you are not a good writer. Just know it's part of the process. So number one is work from a table of contents. And the mistake people make is just starting to write with no real plan in mind. So what's number two?
So number two is making it all about you. And we all do this. It is one of the human conditions that is a huge challenge for every single person on the planet to come out of their own story, their own life, their own thoughts. We're consumed with our own selves. That's part of the human condition. So when you're writing a book, you have to continually do that. Even last night, the author that I was talking to last night, she kept saying, well, I want to make sure this is my voice. I want to make sure I'm expressing myself. And I said, that's great. And I support that. And we'll work on that. But it's not about you. It's about your reader. So keep shifting your focus to from yourself to your reader. So focusing on your reader and sharing with them in mind. So some things that would go along kind of with that is if you're going to share your own experiences, the point is, you have to really look at it and say, is this a powerful lesson that's a universal lesson in this story? And then you share the lesson, the universal lesson, and then you share the story. And ideally, you actually share someone else's story because that actually is a lot more meaningful. It's hard for us sometimes to see our own stories straight. But great writers do share their own story, but they support a point that they're trying to make overall that's a universal theme that we all can benefit from. And as you go through, the way to keep staying with the reader is to keep asking, why does the reader care about this? What is the reader getting from this? And in addition with that is, you don't really have to say, I keep taking out of, you know, a few books I've been working on that I think and I feel. Like, we know you think this, we know you feel this because you're the author. You don't have to put those in. So those are kind of some of the things that go around with that human condition of, you know, being just a little self-centered, which we all are. I don't know. Not at all.
Be yourself, sister.
I'll speak for myself.
Obviously, I joke. Yeah, no, but we experience life only through our own lens, and so writing is not necessarily, unless you are, you know, an extremely famous person and people want to read your journal entries. You know, most people don't care about your journal entries. They want
to
know.
We kind of leave that for like the YouTube videos, right? If you want to go and, you know, talk all about yourself, go on YouTube, because there's a lot of people that do that and people love that, right? But it really
and there's a time. Yeah, there's a time for it. There's a platform for it. There's a way to do it that is comforting, because I feel that in some of my own writing, where I share personal excerpts, people will often say like, oh, wow, you do that too. You know, there is some power in creating a little bit of vulnerability and showing the reader, but it doesn't have to be all about you.
Yeah, and that's the trick, to figure out, how do I share these things that I have learned from, that are my personal experiences, that do share my vulnerability, that you're a real human, with not making it all about you. So that's the job of an editor, to kind of call them on, hey, you're making it all about yourself again. And so that's one of the things that we do. And honestly, to be a really good writer, I think you have to learn how to come outside yourself. You know, just like being a good teacher, being a good parent, you have to come outside of your own self. And it's a wonderful thing for us to do as humans. So writing a book is great in that way, because I think we become more than we were before when we go through that experience.
For sure. So that brings us to number 3.
Number 3, yeah. And so these first 3 are all kind of related more to the developmental stage overall. And the last 2 that we'll talk about are a little bit more in the line editing stage. But so number 3 is thinking that you, just like you said before, that it takes a team to write a book. So thinking you can write a book alone, or not, and in other words, like kind of in parentheses, not taking the advice of your editor. You can't write a book alone. You really can't. And I mean, you can, but it's not going to be the book you actually want to put out into the world and that you want people to read. And so that would be really the thing that I would say, is take the advice of your editor, or editors, because you're going to have multiple. You'll have a developmental editor, you'll have a line editor, you'll have a proofreading editor. And that, you want that, because you want all those different fresh eyes on your manuscript, catching the things that you can't see because you're so far into it. So just remember, it's a team. Listen to your editor, let them work with you, because our job as editors is to make your book as good as we can make it. And we love you, and we'll support you, and we'll work with you, and we care about you. But honestly, we care more about the book than we care about you, in the sense that the book is what matters, right? You're paying us to help you create the most amazing book that we can. And so that would really be like the next one. And you know,
yeah, and back to, you know, explaining the publishing industry, which I think is really important to understand. When you go into publishing a book, you have a lot of options. And
yes.
So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I've written my book and I want it to be this way, then you probably don't want to work with a hybrid publisher like us, because we're the type of publisher who will deliver a traditionally published book with the quality of the editorial, the quality of the design. But there are certainly ways to go about publishing a book where you don't have to go through all this editorial.
Yes.
You can simply take your Word document and you can get it designed and you can upload it into KDP and get your book done and have it exactly the way you want it. But at the end of the day, if the editorial is not strong, it's not going to sell well, and it's not going to represent you well. So what Heather's saying is that you're really paying for a process that more popular authors are going to have included with their traditional publishing contracts. Absolutely. And so that's what you want. You want your book to stand out next to any book at Barnes & Noble and feel like this is the same quality of a book.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing that makes me think of, April, is that being a hybrid publisher as we are, we do work for you. You are the author, and you are the one who gets to make decisions about things. We are guiding you. We are suggesting. We are not giving any ultimatums on this is how it has to be. That's not, you know, so we work together.
We want to sometimes, truth be told. You get to say it at the end of the
so, you know, so as the author, you're in control of this, and we are your advisors. So know that, you know, there have been plenty of suggestions that I have made that the author didn't take. And that's fine. Thankfully, most of our authors take the majority of our suggestions, and the book ends up being better. So,
yeah. So, and you know, Heather has such a wonderful way of delivering the good news and the not so good news. And that's
it's all good news, though, really. It's all good news.
It's all good news. But you know, it's like if you're, you know, we both are moms and we both have kids, and if you want them to be on your team and help you pick up the house, you want to offer some compliments and say what's the good things they've done, and here's a couple of things we need to change, and you know, straighten out the bed and pick the clothes up off the floor, but great job, you put forth some effort.
Yes. And I do, I mean, I'm like you know that I'm the biggest cheerleader for our authors.
Such the biggest cheerleader.
I get so excited when they do things. You know, that same author that I've been talking about, she came up with a new chapter for a new title for one of her chapters. And the title chapter was very like about herself. And I said, you know, that doesn't cut it. You need to do something that's more universal. And it took us months to figure it out. And she finally came up with it, and it's brilliant. And she was able to come up with it because we had gone back and forth and back and forth. She didn't use any of the ones I gave her, but the ones I gave her helped her to come to the one that's the right title for that chapter. So it's exciting to do that. And then we get to like cheer, yay, we did it.
So good. So number 4, and I know you said we're going to be bridging into line editing.
Yeah, you know, April, can I say one other thing that I wanted to say about that last one, about number 3? And I want to come back to your analogy that you used in the beginning of building a house, because when you think about it, okay, you don't just get 2x4s and put them together, but when you think about a house, how many people does it take to build a house? Unless it's a log cabin with no plumbing, it's probably not going to be one person, right? So let's think of our book like that.
Place that I'm going to live.
Do you want a log cabin with a one-room log cabin with no plumbing? Like maybe you do. But for the most part, most of us don't want to live in that kind of a house, and that's how books are. So how many people does it take to build a house? Well, think of that about a book. That's what it takes to make a good book. I mean, you have editors, you have designers, you have project managers, you have the author, you have a team of people building this book, just like building the house. So I wanted to come back to that because that was a great analogy. The other thing I would say about, really listening to your editor and working with your editor, if you look at any good book and you go to the acknowledgments, who is almost one of the first persons that they effervescently thank from the bottom of their heart? Their editor or editors, right? And so listen to authors who are successful and have published, and they will tell you, you need a good editor and a team of editors to work with you. So I think I probably, I've said enough about that topic.
No, it's true. It's true. And the point that you made too about, the bouncing the ideas back and forth, as the author, you are the creative mind behind your project, and you do have the right to say yes or no to some of the suggestions and the ideas that are thrown back into your court. Some of them you may take, some of them you may not take. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when the book is published, it's your decision how your words and your story shape up. And we're here to just guide the process. So, and that's the fun of it. It's like, playing tennis, you hit the ball, they hit it back, you hit it, they hit it back. And, hopefully everybody's smiling along the way. Nobody's playing in the Wimbledon right now. So
no, we've had a lot of fun, actually.
Of course. But I mean, that's, and as a sidebar, when you're looking for a publisher, as in any relationship that you're in, look at the energy that someone brings to the project.
Absolutely.
I think that's really key. That's a key piece of life advice, if you will, in friendships, in, relationships that are intimate, in business relationships. You want to make sure that you're not dreading the phone call from the editor because they're, pointing their finger at you. You want to make sure you feel really good, because it's a vulnerable time when you're bringing your words to somebody else and letting them look at it. It can feel very scary. And so, my advice is to really just, do some interviewing process and see, what teams are out there of people, because certainly we're not the only game in town. There's plenty of people that do what we do. And I would say just take your time in choosing that team that you want to build your house with you.
Absolutely. So. And one of the things I love about our team is that we are so loving and enthusiastic. And I think that, and we have fun, honestly, like when you look at everything that's happening in the world today, it's like, if we're not having fun, what is the point of this? Like, we want to enjoy this, So,
for sure. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more now that we've got, kind of a solid manuscript put together. We've got that table of contents that's detailed. We've got, we're not just dumping our own stories on other people. We're working. What was number 3? Why is my
so you're listening to your editor, that you make the mistake of thinking you can do it alone, that you've worked as part of the team. Yeah.
So then number 4.
So then the next 2 kind of move a little bit more into the specifics in the line editing. And this is good to keep in mind as you write from the beginning, but this is kind of where the second stage of editing, the line editing, comes in. And that's about using too many words, honestly. When there are too many words in a sentence, when there are too many sentences in a paragraph, when things are too long, the reader's not going to read it. You're going to lose them. They're going to get nothing. So you're better off giving them a few short, simple, easy things that they'll actually read. I mean, most people's attention span is not very long, so you don't want to give them too many things.
I actually just asked you what number 3 was, and you told me in about 30 seconds ago.
Case in point, our attention spans, you know, we're going in 5 directions, right? So really it's about not using too many words. And probably the thing I spend, especially in the line edit, the most amount of time is just cutting words out. And that's fine, because it's okay when you write to put more words that are needed, because then what we can do is we can pull out the ones that aren't needed. And it's kind of like, you know, you're looking for the gems in the rocks, right? And that's okay. But do keep that in mind as you write. Do I really need this many words to say it? You know, we had a manuscript that came to us last year that was like 90,000 words. And does a book really need to be 90,000 words? You know, like, so we were able to take it down to 60,000 words and actually say more, I think, than the 90,000 words said. And it was a much better book that way. And that's what happens with almost every project that comes in, because you just don't need all those. And we want to get down to just what the reader needs to hear, really. So ask yourself as you're writing, how can I be more concise? How can I have more clarity? How can I, because really in a chapter, there's one main point in a chapter, honestly, like in a nonfiction book, here's the main point, and then everything else is support and examples and stories to go with that. So, right. You know, do you need 40 pages for that? Probably not. You know, we can cut that out. And that's one of our favorite things, because then it's much more efficient. And honestly, a book of fewer words is probably actually a better book than a longer book. Oh, there's a quote I wanted to share with you. And this comes from one of our authors. One of the things I love, I'll put an aside in here to do, is I ask most of my authors, especially in nonfiction, but even in fiction, to come up with a quote that can start the chapter, you know, right under the chapter title, because it kind of gives people a feel and it brings in someone else's wisdom, which I think is really valuable. And this was actually a quote that one of our authors, whose book is coming out next month, came up with, and I love this. And this is by Elie Wiesel, I think. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, and I apologize because I haven't ever said it out loud. I've only read it. But anyway, this is what this wise man said, whose name I probably just butchered. There is a difference between a book of 200 pages from the very beginning and a book of 200 pages, which is the result of an original 800 pages. The 600 are still there, only you don't see them. You know, so although we're saying be concise, although we're saying prepare, although we're saying don't say more than you need to, sometimes you have to write 500 pages, but that's not going to be the book. It's so that you can get all the stuff that then makes the 200-page book.
Yeah.
So
that's a good.
So that's number 4 is, you know, using too many words, really.
Yes, and redundancy.
Yeah, you don't have to say it 5
under that umbrella. Yeah. You know, people, you know, that they made the point, but then in the next chapter they're remaking the same point, and I'm thinking I already read that point, like back there.
Yeah, I don't need it. Yeah, I don't need it. I mean, yes, it's true that it's good to share things in different ways with people, but you just say it and they either get it or they don't get it. You don't have to keep saying it, really.
Well, you want to treat your readers like they're intelligent people.
Yes, right. Well, because honestly, I mean,
at least that's how I would like someone who reads my book to be an intelligent person. So.
Honestly, I mean, the books that we're publishing are for people who want to think about ideas and read and learn and who are intelligent, you know? I mean, for the most part, that's who our books are for.
Absolutely. People who would like to, now I'm not even like, my goldfish brain is like the goldfish bowl.
But people who are thinking and reflecting and asking themselves questions, I mean, they're smart enough to be able to read and think about and reflect on what you're saying. So,
right. Raise the global consciousness is what I was trying to think.
Absolutely. Yes, that's exactly.
So number 5.
Number 5. So number 5 is like super kind of fun. So the 5th mistake that I would say that authors make, and this is where a good editor comes in, but you don't want to annoy your editor too much by, you know, so the number 5 is not knowing how to use punctuation, not understanding punctuation. Now, you don't have to be an expert in punctuation. That's why we have editors. We understand your writers, but it's not that hard. Do some research on how to use commas, on how to use semicolons, on how to use parentheses and dashes. Look at some really good books that you like and just notice the punctuation. Because when we speak, it's very different than when we write. You know, when I'm speaking to you, I don't need punctuation because the pauses and all that give you the punctuation. If you only have the written word, you need something to guide the reader. So all this punctuation is totally your friend as an author. And one of the things that happens is most of our writers are pretty smart and they can do pretty complex sentences. So if you're going to do that, you really need these punctuations, like punctuation marks. Like, for example, we have an amazing book by a PhD, and so tons of amazing information, research. Her whole life of research is in this book. And her sentences are pretty complex because she's sharing some really cool ideas. And she's trying to give the examples. And so there's a lot of phrases or independent clauses in one of her sentences. And we had to put semicolons in because that gives the reader a way to read that sentence. The commas weren't cutting it. It wasn't enough. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but honestly, each of these things is a friend of yours, a tool for you to use. So do some research, find out, how to use them, and then it will make your life and the reader's life a lot easier, because literally without punctuation, your reader can't read your book.
Yes.
I mean, that's how important.
That includes more than knowing how to put a period in a capital letter.
Yeah, and you notice I assume if you're coming to us, you need to already know about periods and capital letters, but you don't necessarily know how to use other punctuation marks, and even
to be honest, that's why I have an editor like Heather, because if you asked me to put a semicolon, I wouldn't know, but I would know how to tell you to launch a book on Facebook. So,
right, and that's why we have
our strengths.
Yes, we have our team.
So, when you bring your manuscript to us or a publisher, if you can really look through it and look through these 5 main points before, you'll save yourself a lot of time in the process of getting your book published. Because as Heather said, going through the editorial arcs that a book goes through, it can take quite a bit of time and it's quite a bit of effort. But you can have some beta readers in your family, friends, get some feedback. Some of these things people will pick up on who may be outside of your, let's say if you're writing a category specific book, have a few beta readers that aren't within that network and have them say, does this make sense to you? Try to figure out, is your ideal reader getting the message that you want them to get? And then when you come work with an editor, your job will be a lot easier. So I appreciate you, Heather.
Well, and you know what? Of course, I'm a good editor. So what I would like to do at the end is just say all 5 one more time.
Yes, I would love for you to, because you know what?
Yeah, so we'll go back and review because we talked about a lot. We'll simplify it.
You were also an English teacher for a number of years, so that's the teacher in you coming out.
Yes. So the teacher in me, I really do want to help everyone who's listening to this. So number 1, so the error is not preparing enough, not taking the time to prepare. Number 2, making it all about you or being a little too self-focused. Number 3, thinking that you can write a book alone, that you don't need a team or an editor, and not listening to your editors and not, taking that into consideration. And then number 4 is using too many words, too many sentences, too long of things. And number 5 is not understanding how to use punctuation. So those are our 5 that hopefully will help lots of writers out there make even better books.
And you know what I was just thinking? Because we're such a positive cheerleader type thing, we can reverse all those around and tell them what now they should do, right?
Yeah, well, and I was kind of really tempted because it's a challenge for me, because I always try to focus on the positive. So that's perfect. Right. So do you want to do the 5 or do you want me to do it?
No, we'll end with this, which is the encouraging things that we want you to do.
Absolutely.
It's number 1.
Take enough time to prepare and make a really detailed table of contents to write from.
Absolutely. So you want to have it laid out so you know what's the bullseye. So number 2.
And then number 2 is always asking yourself, why does the reader care? Keep shifting your focus to the reader. What am I giving the reader? So focus on the reader. That's who you care about, right? Because that's the whole point of writing a book for most of us.
Yes. And then number 3.
And so then number 3 is take the advice of your editor. Get good editors and work with them and listen to them and get to know them. And like April said, be really comfortable with them, but then listen to them and let them help you.
Perfect. Number 4.
Number 4 is be concise. Cut out extra words or make sure you have a good team member or team members to help you do that. Get rid of words that you don't need. Clean out, just like we're all cleaning our closets out right now. Clean it out. Clean it out.
Are we doing that?
Many people are cleaning their clothes. My children did.
Hypothetical people out there.
My children did. It's really nice.
And then number 5.
And then number 5 is get really comfortable with, do some research on, take some time on punctuation. How do you use commas and semicolons and dashes and parentheses? How do you use those as your friend, and because they help the reader? So punctuation.
And you know what? I actually have a sixth point.
Yay! That's awesome. I love when that happens.
And you know why? Because at the end of the day, I think, as you said earlier, our human nature, for example, is to think more about ourselves. So that's why most authors generally write, and it's all about them, right?
Yes.
But I think our human nature also is sometimes to phrase things in the negative. So
Yes.
when we talked about doing this episode, it was like the 5 mistakes, because that's more of a marketing thing, right?
Yes.
It's, people want to know, what are the mistakes and how
Yes.
can
I don't want to do that. Like, tell me what they are.
Yes, exactly. But if you find that you're writing things not to do, you're writing in the negative, which is very common, and it's the way most of us speak. It's like, as parents, like, don't do that, don't touch that. Instead, why don't we say, hey, come over here, you can play with this, right? Redirection, for example.
Absolutely.
So how can you rephrase things from the negative into the positive? And you can do that with anything.
And that's super important.
Right.
Yes. I learned that when my 18-year-old was 2 years old. There was an experienced mom of like 4 kids who said to me, and I've never forgotten this: children's brains do not hear the not or the no. So if you say don't slam the door, all they hear is slam the door. They don't hear the don't. So you have to tell them, and this is where I learned to be even more positive, you have to tell them what you want, because their brain literally can't process it. And it's probably that way with most of us, right? So that has always helped me to really be positive. Tell people what you want, give them the vision of what you want. And when you go to the whole idea of, energy and law of attraction, whoever out there is into that, literally you manifest what you put out. So if you keep putting out the negative, that's what you keep getting back, right? So that's a great 6th point, is the positive. And it's funny, because one of the things I almost put in here was having a lot of authors do double negatives, and the reader's brain can't process that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's great. I love the 6th one. Yeah. So the 6th one is be positive.
Be positive. Tell the reader what you hope for them, what you are excited for about them, the things that they can do to make their life better, if that's what you're writing about. So
give them vision. Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you for your time on a Sunday.
Oh, you're so welcome.
You may
my
not listen
pleasure.
to this on a Sunday, but we are recording this on a Sunday. And I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done with all of our authors. They're blessed to have you. I'm blessed to have you. And I know we're going to have many more books that change the world. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's my honor and my pleasure. And it's been lovely to work with you and be part of this team and all of our awesome authors. And thank you to all the authors out there who have let us learn some of these things in depth on them. That's been awesome. It's been a wonderful partnership. So thank you so much for having me on.
So that concludes this episode, and we look forward to connecting with you again. I'm April O'Leary, and I'm here with Heather Desrocher, and we are your O'Leary Publishing team. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
So this has been another episode of the iBook Podcast. I'm April O'Leary signing off. Be sure to hop on over to o'learypublishing.com to start your author adventure and see what writing a book could do for you in your profession, in your career, and what doors it might open. We thank our guests for being a part of the show today, and be sure to subscribe to podcasts here on YouTube. We look forward to serving you and helping you get your book out into the world.